our brain is great at ruminating, but we can stop ourselves, our negative rumination, and we can change it to positive rumination and put ourselves on a right track by breaking our patterns and changing our state.
Welcome to the Lara Jane Layton Show. This podcast is for you, the person who keeps putting others first. Your self-talk has held you back. You no longer need to take a second seat. Let's explore ways to overcome self-doubt. You can silence that inner bully voice and achieve your full potential. Here's your host, Lara Jane.
Welcome to the show, friend. I have my new best friend, PJ, with me. And I'm so excited to talk about this conversation because have you ever wanted that brain hack? You know, you want that thing that just works, that thing that just, magic. And it's like, what are the things? So we have all these other kind of hacks going on in the world. Why not fix our brain with them? And so PJ's here to talk to us about brain hacks and how it can help us with our burnout or our stress or just life in general to keep having that motivation to keep on going. But before we jump in, we're going to get a quick word from our sponsor. When we come back, PJ's going to help us to hack our brain. So we'll be right back.
This is Adam Adams, co-founder of Optimized LLC, where we take the guesswork out of your health. If you're feeling exhausted, struggling with weight, or just not feeling yourself anymore, your hormones might be the problem. And that's why we test, not guess, analyzing your blood work to pinpoint exactly what's holding you back. At Optimized LLC, we help you rebalance your hormones, boost energy, and reclaim your life. Don't settle for normal. Aim for optimized. Just go to optimized.com to book your free introductory coaching call. It's a free call to help you take the first step toward feeling your best.
All right, PJ, help me hack my brain. The information about you is in the show notes. So let's get started. Help me. I'm going to go for that burnout. You know, sometimes I just want to get up in the morning. I just want to lay 5 more minutes. How do I make that go away?
You know, sometimes it's appropriate to lay there for 5 more minutes and just to decompress. A great way to start your day is it's really based on the attitude that you're already in. Some people say, oh, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Well, if you say that, your day is probably going to go poorly. So if you wake up thinking that, then what you do is you think, what am I grateful for? Or who do I love? Or who loves me? It could even be your dog. I mean, you just introduced me to your dogs. They are so cute and they're just lovers. So it doesn't matter who it is or what it is, but if you put yourself in the state of gratitude and or love, now you're going to change that attitude and you're going to set up your day to be successful, to move forward. And when you set the tone for the day based on setting the tone of your brain, you also notice really good things because there's something called your reticular activating system. And the best example of how this works is you go to the car dealer and you say, okay, I'm going to get this really cool color that nobody else has. And you get your car in that really great, unique color that no one else has. And then over the next couple weeks, you see that color everywhere. And you're like, man, what the heck? They must be copying me. How did they know? It's your reticular activating system that is set up now to notice that. So if you start your day on a positive note, and the quickest way to do that is putting it in a state of gratitude or love, then your reticular activating system is going to be set up to notice really awesome things. So that's really the way, if you are laying there for that first 5 minutes, to start your day off awesome.
You know, there's been a time when I was joking around about getting up on the wrong side of the bed. And I went, hey, wait. And I ran back to bed and wiggled around, turned around and got up. So I was getting off, like I couldn't get off on the other side of the bed, but I could get off at the other side of my body. It's like, okay, now it's right. And sometimes it's just stupid little things like that that will trick your brain into, okay, it's the right side. I went to a training once where they said, never ask somebody how they're doing. because that gives them full latitude to think anything in their mind, and or it's so cliche they don't think anything at all. But if you say something different, like, "God, what's the beautiful thing that's happened so far in your day today?" Where
Yeah.
you're asking them to focus on, show me something good, and their mind automatically is looking for something good, and you've just triggered that whole positive thought process in them
Yeah.
by just not doing the cliche, "How are you today?"
Mhm. Absolutely. And you can ask somebody a different question. You can say, "What awesome thing has happened to you recently?" Because, I mean, if you're passing somebody in the elevator, you don't really have time for a conversation. But if it's somebody that you really want to know, are interested in, and have the time, why not ask a question like that? Just an open-ended question to actually have a conversation, because humans are pack animals and we need connection because of that. And when we are connecting with other people, that's another thing that sets our brain up to have a really good day, because we need that connection so much.
And when you're talking about, ask the question, and if you really are just passing in the hall and there's no time to answer the question, you could say something like, "God, wasn't the sun gorgeous this morning, or the sky gorgeous this morning?" Just something that makes them think about something positive instead of that open-ended. It's like when the kids come home from school and you go, "What'd you learn today?" And they're like, "Every teacher taught me about a million things, and you want me to think about something I learned?"
Mhm,
That's just, like, overwhelming, like, nothing? And
mhm,
so it's like, "God, what did you have anything that made you smile today? Did anybody say anything really cool to you today?" And what is it that
mhm.
they can focus on that's positive? And
Yeah.
guess what? Little brain hack you're talking about when we do it to ourselves, you
Yes.
know? Like, instead of, like, my one that I preach the most is sorry, because that one makes you feel a little bit shameful, because our parents make us say sorry for things we don't even know we're sorry for. And so that's just this painful thing. So how do you say, "Geez, thanks for waiting for me. I know that I got distracted in the hall," if you have to point out the bad thing. But it's like, "Hey, thanks for waiting for me. Let's get started." Or, "Thanks for starting without me instead of sorry I'm late." What are those things that get you out of that shame? And that's your personal self-talk.
Bingo. You just said it. What made you smile today? That would be a great question to ask kids when they get home from school, because it's very specific. Now they're going to go back and think about when they smiled and what the situation was. And it's great to help them go back to that situation, to relive it, because your brain doesn't actually know the difference between remembering something or it actually happening. So if we go back and remember stuff that was awesome, the brain thinks it's happening again. So if we go back to remember when we smiled, and this is a question we can ask ourselves: what made me smile? When was the last time I smiled, and what was that? Now we can go back and relive it, and we can experience it again. And our body's going to be pumping out all the same endorphins and hormones and everything, all the feel good stuff that happened then, just because we're revisiting in our mind. The opposite can happen too. So the brain goes more easily towards a worst case scenario story than a best case scenario story. And so the first step is to catch ourselves when we start going there. And then we say, "Oops, nope," because the brain is going to make up stories. Our brains are wired for stories. That's why in human existence, we didn't have a written language for so long, because we just passed everything down through stories. So because we're wired for stories, the brain is going to make stuff up. And it's really good at making up worst case scenario stories and crummy at making up best case scenario stories. But it's a skill that gets better with practice. So the first step, like I said, is to catch yourself when you are making up a worst case scenario story, and then just say, "Okay, stop. This isn't real. This is just a story, and my brain needs stories. So, since I'm here making up stories and nothing is real, let's make up a best case scenario story. So, what's the opposite of where my brain just went? Because that's not real. So let's make up a best case scenario story that's not real. because it doesn't matter whether it's real or not. If you're experiencing something in your imagination, your brain actually thinks you're doing it, and you are experiencing right now and right there, because the story is really is real. Now, if you get really good at catching yourself when you're making up worst case scenario and really good at creating best case scenario stories, then you're going to get better at it every time you do it, because it's a skill that gets better with practice. And pretty soon you're living these best case scenario stories. And then guess what? You start manifesting those kinds of things. And your reticular activating system starts noticing opportunities to make stuff like that happen. They always say, oh, it's the power of the universe and stuff comes back and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's you. It's your brain. It's you making stuff up and then manifesting that stuff with the help of your brain. Because our brains operate at about the level of a 3-year-old. Our subconscious is a toddler, and our subconscious is in charge of us. Our subconscious brain is running the show. So our boss is a toddler, and that's the bad news, because, toddlers can be stubborn and the terrible twos and all that kind of stuff. They like the status quo, they like comfort, all that kind of thing. And so they're going to fight change. But the good news is we have a prefrontal cortex, which is the parent brain, and the parent brain can train the toddler. And so far, what we've talked about with these two techniques is training the toddler. So we literally rewire the toddler, and the toddler also doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. And so if we do it emphatically, we can rewire that toddler, our boss, so then our boss helps us instead of works against us.
Never thought of it as that my toddler is actually the one in charge up there.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes a lot of sense because they're the free soul. When we were free, they were able to just explore and be and not have that, oh, is it safe?
Yeah.
A million years ago, it was really important that we
Mm-hmm.
looked at worst case scenario, because walking out the cave door, you needed to make sure you weren't going to be dinner. So
Yep.
you had to create those worst case scenarios to survive. And the good news is we don't have to anymore. You can be safe walking out your door. You can be safe going places. And now you can look at best case scenario. It's like, what is that best case scenario? What is it that I could create on this drive? Maybe I want to see some wildlife, or maybe, it's like going
Yep.
on a scenic tour, or are you just wanting it to be fast and nobody in your way? Because there's going to be, I just want to get there fast. I just want to enjoy it. And guess what? Neither of them are wrong. It's like, do
Yeah.
you? I'm like, you
Yeah.
used to drive me nuts when my kid would say, do you? And I go, that doesn't make any sense. That's stupid. But it's totally what I
Yep.
feel today is be true to who you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the toddler is part of you. I mean, the toddler can help us too. And you just said something that's really valuable in the whole creative part, because toddlers are very creative. And when we can there's a lot of things that we can tap into our toddler that will help us. And just think about how much fun a toddler has playing with a box or a stick. She makes up tons of different things to do, and they just have a blast for hours. And so if we can get back to that and channel some of our toddler on the good parts and train toddler out of some of the challenges. I have a two-year-old grandson now, and I get to spend all day with him every Thursday, which is such a blast. That's my highlight of the whole week. So I know these toddlers really well. And I was talking to my daughter, his mom, and he was just doing something just that either of us would ever have thought of. He's doing something on the floor that was really creative, and we're just blown away. And I said, you know how people say how they get rewarded for thinking outside the box? And I pointed to him and I said, no box. And so if we can channel our toddler, and it's a lot easier to think outside the box because we have a toddler inside of us that has no box. And so it's easy to go outside the box when there is no box. We learn to have a box as we grow up, and others teach us that there's a box, but we have a toddler inside that has no box. So it'd be great to be able to channel that, and we get a lot more creative when we do.
And bringing me back to an old story, it's been years, but every time my granddaughter would say, "Oh, I really like boats," or like be really fascinated with it, Grandma'd go have a boat toy here or a lion toy or whatever she was fascinated with. And then I read or heard that when we give our kids something like that, we're taking away their creativity. When they can take this plain thing and turn it into a lion,
Mhm.
or this plain thing and turn the box and turn it into the
Mhm.
boat, that's where we're teaching our kids to use their thinking brain instead
Mhm.
of just giving them this final solution. And it's the
Mhm.
same with us. The
Mhm.
more we just, oh, I can Google that. I'll have the answer here in 5 seconds. We're
Mhm.
getting lazy in our brains of trying to look things up. We try, but it just tells us. So, how do we get our own brains back in that creative mode?
Mhm.
Because mine's gotten in its own sense lazy because I can just get an answer to anything. But I never try to figure out well, I do, but it's the analytical, that figuring out that thing that puts us back to our primal self.
Mhm. Boy, that's good. And the easiest, quickest way to do it is to stop and stare out the window. There's actually been research on this that when you're staring out into the light, or better yet, if you can go outside and just look up in the sky, your brain starts getting creative. And it's an exercise to put it on your calendar to do that and just to stare off into space. I used to get in trouble for this when I was in school because I was the kid that did that all the time. And in third grade, I daydreamed so much that my mom had to put together a note system where she would send me with a note with grades for certain things. And it was all about attention on a piece of paper. And then my third grade teacher would grade me and check boxes at my mom. And so then I come home and I get rewards for good boxes that are checked. And then I would have a discussion about the boxes that weren't checked, and it was amazing. So it really helped, and it was super effective, and I even remember it just like it was yesterday. And however, the paying attention improved. So, the ADD improved, but it wasn't something that was stifling creativity because my mom knew that I needed that, just not when I'm in the middle of class. And so she still encouraged it at home and she let me daydream because she knew that's how my brain was wired. And I kept doing it. I learned how to meter it and when to do it and when not to do it, when I need to pay attention, which is great exercise for the prefrontal cortex because that's a part of the brain where you are paying attention that helps you do that. And it's also a skill that gets better with practice. But we need that creative side too. And just staring off into the sky is probably the best way to start the ball rolling.
You're talking about this is taking me back to school. They have this image of how you learn, and that's to sit still and stare at a teacher. And you're sitting there, folded hands, staring at a teacher, and you are kind of tuning out the words because you're going through this motion of, I need to look like I'm paying attention.
Mm,
And where that kid that could be looking out in the sky, that sky could be their whiteboard and they could be taking the words that are being said and creating relationships and things in their mind that bring these words together. I
Mhm.
was the doodler. If I wasn't doodling, I wasn't listening. It was my way of taking the words and making connection and staying focused instead of just staring.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I would get poor grades in high school because I was always in trouble for doodling. But I get to college and I ended up with straight A's because my brain functioned differently than the other 20 kids in the classroom. And
Mhm.
so allowing your kid inside of you
Mm.
to start learning its way,
Mhm.
because we do stifle it all growing up of this is the way you're supposed to act. This is the way you're supposed to learn. And we
Mm.
don't all learn that way.
Bingo. There's so many different learning styles, and there's so many different types of brain wiring. And this is why I invented my brain type test. So I own a gym, and we do a unique exercise methodology. And I also help people on, nutrition and health stuff. But it's really hard sometimes for some people to adhere to some things that I tell them. It's because I haven't told them the right way and I haven't taught them the right way. But if I know their brain wiring, how their brain is wired, then I can talk to them with using their language. Because the main problem with personal trainers nowadays is they tell their clients what to do, give them health advice or fitness or nutrition. And then the client comes back. There's an 80% chance that the client's going to come back and say, gosh, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just can't do it. And then the trainer says, well, just suck it up and have more willpower. Well, that's not the answer. It's just that the trainer has found out what works best for them, and they're assuming that's going to work best for their client. But there's only a 20% chance it will, because most likely their client is going to have very different brain wiring, and it's not going to work the way that they described. So, thanks to my mom inspiring me through her journey through early onset Alzheimer's, she was diagnosed back in 2000. And back then we didn't know enough to help. So she passed in 2005, but I never stopped studying the research. And because of all that brain research I've done, that's how I came to develop my brain type test to help my people. And so then they take the test. It's a quick 20-question test, and then they're one of 16 brain types. And then now that I know their brain type, now I know how to talk to them. Now I know the half a dozen brain training, rewiring techniques that are going to work for them, so I can help them with those and then get them a lot better results because I'm talking to them based on their brain wiring with things that they're going to understand that can motivate them and get them the results they want, because now I know what works and I can help them with what works.
You're talking about this test, and I bet you it would help us just understand ourselves.
Mhm.
How should I motivate myself to
Mm.
be its peak? Because I can be pretty demotivating to myself. I can beat
Mhm.
myself up pretty good to where I
Mhm.
feel useless, a waste of space. You go with all the negative things that we can have cross our brains. And if I could
Mm.
just learn to talk to myself in a more
Yep.
supportive way. And, I used the example of that woman who was beat and in an abusive relationship. And when you say the words, I love you, she cringes. To
Mm.
her, that's a result of just having been beat. And so you
Mm.
have that cringe moment where you can say it to most of the people in the world and they go, oh, thank you.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so the words and the way we communicate aren't just words.
Mhm.
There's emotions behind them. And when we use something that hurts our own self or stymies our own self, yes, I need to learn to get over it if I was the abused woman that got it. But you know what? It's not that easy. And so I need to deal with hearing those words or she.
Mhm.
It's like, what
Mhm.
is it that's you specific that we can try on for you? What can we change to help you free up some of that baggage that's holding us up? That you must make people happy or nobody will like you. Well, who cares I can't make anybody else happy. I can only make
Mm,
myself happy.
mm. That's so true. We can't change other people. We can only change ourselves. And there's a brain training, one of my brain training techniques. Most people think of it as affirmations. I call them declarations because you're declaring something to be true. And when you say your declaration, it is as if it's already happened. And so, but it's important how you say it, because if you give someone else a declaration that works for you, there's a 20% chance it'll work for them, but they need their own words. So you have to know how to talk to yourself, like you mentioned just a little bit ago. And that's what people learn also with this brain type test, is how to talk to themselves. So because I know my brain type, I know how to talk to my toddler to more effectively train him, and quicker and more effectively and faster. But I also know how to talk to my wife, because here's, and a lot of people have told me this who have taken the brain type test, even though the results sheet is more geared toward health and fitness goals, they've helped it to motivate themselves in other ways too. And even to understand their spouse better so they don't get as frustrated. And one example is, soon after I finished developing, it took me 5 years to get this done, and perfected. But then I understood my brain better and my wife's brain better. She's more of a sensing type. We had just bought these drinks, these sugar-free drinks that were really yummy. And so we split them up. We split the package up. She got 6 and I got 6. And she is a lot more of a sensing type of personality. So flavors, smells, those things mean a lot more to her than they do to me. So she plowed through her drinks because she thought they were so yummy, and she just really enjoyed them. And I had 4 of my 6 left. And so, I'm taking my time, and then she's noticing this on the table and wanting them every time she walks by. So she goes, finally, after a couple weeks, she goes, "Are you gonna drink these?" And before I had developed the brain type test, I would have thought, well, yeah, I mean, those are my half, and I'll get to them eventually. But because I knew she's sensing, and it doesn't really make a difference for me about flavors and smells like it does for her, I said, actually, I could go either way. So why don't you take them? And she was thrilled. And no big deal for me, but it's a big deal for her because I knew the difference between our brain types.
That's like really living in their body. I would have just said, sure, have them. I can buy more. Like,
Yeah.
it's not like it's
Right.
the end of the thing. By the time I get around to drinking them, we can have more here.
Uh-huh.
So, but yeah, I think the way you tuned it in was really tuning into the person, really what is best for that person. And if I really, really loved them and I wanted them, then I could say, I'm going to finish them or I'll have more either way. But I loved that because how often do I even ask myself that question?
Mm,
When do I
mm,
really self reflect and go, how important is this to me? I just put off another event not to go hiking with my friends because I need to do something for my mother, or I just got called into a work meeting and I've got to prepare, so I've got to give up yoga tonight, whatever the event is, or even just your personal reading time, or I was planning on taking that long hot bath and going to bed
mm,
early. Those are rewards for good days, but
mhm,
we keep giving them up because
mhm,
something else has just trumped what you felt your importance was to the world.
mhm,
And how do we really teach her brain that we don't want to just put 50 cents of gas in every morning just to make it through the day? But if I can fill up, I can make it through a few days and be so much more productive. But we keep giving ourselves the minimum. This will get me
mhm,
day. This will get me
mhm,
through the day. And how do we take that moment and fill our tank up?
mm. Well, part of it is putting things in perspective. because you can rate things on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 to 10 is a lot better than 1 to 10 because 1 to 10 can sometimes be confused. Well, the 1 is number 1 and 10 is, but if it's 0 to 10, then 0 means it doesn't matter at all. And 10 means it's going to change my life right now. So then you can just instantly put something in perspective. Then once you have that number, you can say, how much is this going to matter a week from now? And then if it's going to matter a lot, then you say, how much is this going to matter a month from now? Then you keep going out into the future until you're years ahead. And that's another way to put things in perspective, because most stuff in our life is small stuff. And we're fretting and we're obsessing over this small stuff that doesn't really matter. But you're using these two scales, the 0 to 10 scale, and how much is it going to matter in a day, a week, a month, a year, 10 years. Then you can put stuff in perspective and decide what you're going to be worrying about and what your mind is going to be occupied about. Then you know what's really important. And then you can focus on that stuff instead of fretting on the small stuff, which also distracts us from the big rocks, the big stuff.
I like the way you said the big rocks, because I always say those are your highest priority. And if you don't fit the big rocks in, you can't fit all the little stuff in after.
Yeah.
Like
Totally.
you gotta get it in. So
Mhm.
so it is identifying, and I love the 0. Don't think I've ever done it, but what an idea, because sometimes I go, I don't even want to give this a 1. It has no priority at all.
Mhm.
Like, so that makes it really smart. It's like, yes, this is a 0. I don't even have to have it on the to-do for the next week, and I'll be just fine. And then
Mm.
looking at the other things, and really that self-reflection that you kind of mentioned at the beginning of just thinking back, and it's like, what is it that
Mhm.
made me light up today? And how do I get more of that? How do you like, ooh, I did this training and I felt like on cloud 9 when I was done. Like,
Mhm.
have you ever just felt like everything clicked and you can just take that and milk it? So on those
Mhm.
days, take those moments and milk them, enjoy them, soak them in,
Mm.
and allow your being to know that that is something that is natural for you. We hide it. Like, oh, I don't dare tell anybody that I think I hit that presentation out of the park. How often do we walk out of a meeting room and say that? Never. But
Mhm.
how often have you felt it?
Mm. Mm. Right. Yeah, it's really about changing your state. When you're in a crummy state, it's pretty easy to change your state and change your direction, because what you're describing here is the flow state. And when you're in your flow state, time isn't even a dimension. You're in your flow state, 2 hours will go by, you'll look at the clock, you'll say, that can't be right. It's only been 5 minutes. Well, that's because you're in your flow state. We can get in our flow state. When we are in a crummy state, time just crawls by. You look at the clock, it feels like 2 hours, and it's only been 10 minutes. You're like, what the heck? So the dimension of time is very flexible in our perception based on what state we're in. When we're in a crummy state, it's easy to get out of that state and get into a flow state. And there's a couple really easy ways to do it. The first way is to change your posture. If you're in a crummy state, you're probably going to be hunched forward in a closed body language. So when you catch yourself in a crummy state, first check your posture. Oh, yeah, my posture is affirming that and forcing that, reinforcing that. So I'm going to sit up straight. I'm going to put my shoulders back. I might even go into a victory pose, put my arms up in the air like a V. Because even if you don't feel like it, changing your posture, if you do, that's the first step into changing your state. And because once you change that, then you've changed your physiology, which now makes it easier to take the next step into other things like switching your thoughts to gratitude or love. because it can be hard. If you're in a crummy state and your posture's forward and you're slumping down, it's hard to go straight to gratitude or love because your brain might say, "Oh, I can't think of anything I'm grateful for," or "I don't love anything right now," because you're that crummy. But if you stand up. I mean, I've had people that are really upset about something. I'm talking on the phone and they're reminiscing and they're ruminating about a problem. So I'll ask them, I'll just interrupt their pattern by asking, "Are you sitting down or standing up?" Now, boom, that's already interrupted their pattern because now they can't go to that same place of their misery because now they have to think about something else. So it kind of derails them at the moment and they go, I'm sitting down. I go, "All right, stand up." Okay. Now they're standing. And I go, "Okay, keep going." So then it's hard for them to get back on track because it's like a CD. I put a scratch in the CD, one scratch, but it'll still play, right? So then they start talking about the thing again. And I go, "Is there a window where you are to look out?" So it's something completely different. And so I'm throwing them off the track again. I go, yeah. And I go, "What's out the window? Is it nice weather, is it sunny, or can you see clouds?" Oh, well, and then kind of almost frustrated because they want to be on their misery track, but I'm knocking them off it. I just put another scratch in the CD. And now if I put enough scratches in that CD, it's not going to play anymore. And they can't ruminate on that same thing the same way because this is one of the biggest problems. Our brain is great at ruminating, but we can stop ourselves, our negative rumination, and we can change it to positive rumination and put ourselves on a right track by breaking our patterns and changing our state. And that's really the solution to these big ruts we get in where we're stuck in a rut. It's with our relationship, it's maybe our spouse, and we just keep same things over and over and we don't know how to stop it. Well, the first step could be as easy as changing your posture, your physiology, even your breathing. Change the way you breathe. Notice how you're breathing and change it. If you're stressed out, it's probably going to be really shallow, top part of your lungs. So stop, take a really deep breath. See how much you can breathe in. See how deeply you can breathe. And then hold it for a couple seconds and notice how your lungs feel. I've never felt lungs this full before. And then slowly exhale that air. That can be enough to change your pattern and change the state you're in. But that's really the key. That's the first step. Change that state, and it's way easier than you think. Focus, physiology, or belief. You can change your physiology. Those are three ways to change your state. Focus, physiology, belief. Physiology is the easiest way. You just change your posture. And then focus is what you're focusing on. Is it positive or negative? Is it worst case scenario or is it best case scenario? Belief is the last one. So you change with the first two, and then you get to the belief. Okay, what do I believe about this? What's really true? And then you ask yourself again, okay, is that true? And then you ask yourself again, okay, is that true? And you keep going until you reach a real truth. And then now you've changed your belief.
God, that makes it sound so easy. It was the other day I was like in this panic attack and really working on my breathing and trying to
Mhm.
do that deep breath. And it's like, I can't even breathe deep. I can't even hold it. I can't even,
Yep.
you just like, you just keep doing it until you can.
Yep.
It's like, you're right. Right now you can.
Yep.
You will be able to. And just
Mhm.
keep doing it because it will pull you out of it. Yeah, it
Mhm.
will get you to where you're now focused on the now instead of all the stuff that might happen in the future. I'm safe right now.
Yeah.
So it's like it works.
Yeah. Mark Twain, there's a famous quote. I'll probably butcher it, but it was something to the effect of, "I've experienced lots of trauma in my life, some of which actually happened." He's he's talking about, all the horrible things that he's imagined that never happened. Well, why waste energy on that? It's because your brain doesn't know the difference between it actually happening and you just making up that story. So just stop those stories because we don't need to spend time with all that trauma that isn't real. Our brain thinks it is. So why are we causing it? We can manifest our future and change our future by changing that story and catching ourselves when it's a bad experience.
So it is. It's like, am I spiraling down or up?
Mm,
What is my current thought process doing to me?
mhm,
And if it is going down, how do I switch it? What is it that I could tell myself? And if you only thing you can think of is I am safe, that is the foundation of what
mm,
we're built on. And
huge.
it's like I am safe. And if okay, I can breathe a little bit better, then you can start coming up with more stuff of
Mhm,
I have a bright future. I can make, what I do today changes my tomorrow. So I'm going to best
yep.
it today. You can start expanding. But there's
Mhm,
sometimes that I am so far into the grungy. I choose to start with I am safe because it's something
mm,
that I know I can grasp and I can
mhm,
hold on to it. And
mm,
then you can start looking at, am I really safe? Yeah, there's no threat around me. Oh, what's going on in my brain? It's thinking about things that may not really happen, So maybe I can change that picture. And I call it our bully, that's our brain telling us all the negative things. And PJ may have said, "Oh, that's silly." And he didn't really say that, but I'm just putting words in his. But I took it as, "Oh, no, I was being silly. What is that about? Why is that not very good? Why should I change it?" And our brains dig this huge hole off
mm,
one little tiny phrase that came out of somebody else's mouth. And
mm,
that's where the turnaround is, oh, he was being playful. He was being supportive, not degrading. And so how do we switch those? And you're gonna have people that are saying words that they want you to feel bad about. You don't have to take it that bad. That's their delivery. You get to pick
mhm,
how you respond.
mhm. Oh, that's so good. Laura Jane, you totally nailed it with the safe thing because that is something that's easy to say, even if you don't mean it. Maybe you're in such a crummy state that you don't feel safe. But is there a reason that you don't feel safe? And is it true? So you can still say it because your toddler doesn't know the difference between acting or truth. Because if you are a good enough actor, if you're emphatic enough with your emotions, you can convince a toddler of pretty much anything because they're not old enough yet to know that you're acting. Same with your own brain, same with your inner toddler. So if you're safe and you say it, even if, I mean, of course, if you're not safe, you'll know it because, you're hanging, you can't, it doesn't work if you're hanging by a thread over a cliff. but or somebody is you're in the process of running away from somebody with a knife, right? You can't stop and do this. But most situations aren't that. And you can find a thread of safety in pretty much any situation. So if you tell yourself that emphatically enough with enough emotion, pretty soon your toddler calms down and your toddler starts to realize that you actually are safe. And you also mentioned the spiral. You're going to either be spiraling up or you're going to be spiraling down. So if you're feeling unsafe, but you're not unsafe, you will continue to feel less safe unless you stop that. Or you can start your safe spiral upward and you will feel more safe as you think about that word. Even thinking of the word can be a first step. And then also thinking of what's good about this situation. Try to think of one thing. What's good about this? If you're in a crummy state, your toddler might first say, nothing. Nothing's good about this. Well, there's probably one thing. So, what's one thing that's good about this? Or, what's good about me? That's another way to change the state. Now, I can think of one thing that's good about me that I like about me. And then once you change direction and now you're spiraling up, your toddler's going to help you. Pretty soon, other things that are good are going to pop into your brain that you can think about, and then it spirals upward.
Get on the wall and you can keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times when you may be in a lot of pain, or you may be in a situation where you are in fear for your life. But at that very moment, you're still alive. You still have your wits about you to make choices. And that in of itself is such a huge thing that humans can do above all other creatures, is we have choice. And we can choose to get out of any situation we choose not to be in. And we can choose to stay in it.
Yeah.
We get the choice. And that's so powerful.
Mm.
If you can't say I'm safe, I have choice.
Yes. And you're right. That's what makes us human. It's our prefrontal cortex. It's way bigger than other animals. And one of the things that we can do is we can simulate situations and even simulate the future. So we can make up stories. We can run simulations. Well, if I do this, this is probably what's going to happen. All the other animals on the planet can't do that. They're only reacting to their present situation. Now, that's a big part of our brain too. The reptilian part of the brain is what a lot of people call it. And we get stuck in our amygdala when we're emotional and when we're scared, and it's fight, flight, or freeze. Most people freeze. And then they just don't do anything and they ruminate. They stay there, frozen, ruminating, making it worse, spiraling down because they're stuck in their animal brain and they're not using their prefrontal cortex. But so far, all these techniques that we've talked about so far activate the prefrontal cortex. And when you're using your PFC, you're necessarily not using your amygdala and your reptile brain, your brainstem, because the brain has a really hard time being in the PFC and the amygdala at the exact same time. So when you're using your PFC with conscious decision, like you said, the ability to decide, and then rationally thinking, like a lot of these brain training techniques that we talked about do, you're pulling out of your amygdala because you're taking the energy and the blood flow into your PFC. And so a lot of times it's just knowing this and knowing when you feel trapped, knowing when you feel this negative emotion that you're ruminating, and just stopping and saying, oh, I'm stuck in my amygdala. Boom. Just saying that, realizing it and saying that out loud is best. Now you've pulled yourself into your PFC. Now you're going to remember some of these brain training techniques, and now you're going to be able to spiral upward.
You make it sound so easy. And I know that when I'm in the middle of that fight, it takes a little bit more than just words, but patience, time. And I hate to use the word letting go, but releasing, where you don't. The reason I don't like the word letting go is when you're in that, I got to hold on, that's the last thing you want to hear.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I am in fear for my life and I got to hold on. And so to me, those words are a fight because when I feel it, I'm in a fight. So it's like, what is it at this moment that would help me feel like I could release this or integrate it into my life where I no longer feel like I have to hold it? And those are, for me, a thought process that helps me not hold on to that negative, that oh, I'm gonna die. Like, how do I integrate something more peaceful? How do I find what are some words I can use? And like, you'll see me writing down all the positive words I can think of in my head, like sunshine, birds singing, and just things that I can think of because I'm trying to pull those back in when my brain is fully fogged out with negativity. It's like, okay, I want to hear the sun, I feel the sunshine. I want to hear the birds sing. And I just start focusing on those things. And at first they're words.
Mhm.
Because the other fog is so heavy. And how do you
Mhm.
turn that into the actual beauty where you can finally actually hear the words singing the birds singing in your head? You can actually feel the warmth on your head and you can get there.
Mhm.
But for me, it's not, the whole idea is every time we go through it, we build that muscle to get there faster.
Mhm.
It still
Mhm.
takes me a while.
Of course. Well, all these are skills that get better with practice, but it actually happens pretty fast. And your point of release is so huge. And you can just ask yourself, because asking yourself questions is very powerful because your subconscious is going to work on that. And you might not even know the answer, but your subconscious is still going to work on that. Even when you're not thinking about it, your subconscious is working on it to answer the question you asked. But what's important is to ask the right questions. So, in your example of holding on to something and you're not able to release it, ask yourself, why am I holding on to this? How is this serving me? How is holding on to this helping me? And maybe it is because there are some things that we need to hold on to think about more. But is it really helping me? And then you say, is this true? And then you say again, is this really true? And so you're asking yourself these questions that your subconscious can help you with and that you can get perspective on. And then if you come to the conclusion that it's not serving me, it's not helping me, then just say, how can I release this? Now, the other part of asking questions is maybe you don't know, and that's okay. But when you ask the question, how can I release this? Now, remember we talked about the reticular activating system? You've just opened it up to notice in the future how you can release this. Everybody has their own style. For me, it's prayer. And because when I release it to God, that's the easiest thing for me. And that's what I've learned has worked the best. Everyone else is different. Everybody has their own techniques. But with your reticular activating system on alert for this, it's going to be working for you to find your magical unicorn technique for releasing and releasing those things that you've decided through questions that you do need to release and get rid of because it's not helping you and it's not serving you.
One of the tricks that I also use is, what is it that I'm not letting in by holding on to this? It's that questioning. What is it that I think this is giving me, but it's actually doing the opposite? And what is it
Mm,
that I really want? And when I start looking at what I really want, it's like, oh, yeah, those are so conflicting, that thing I'm holding on to and that thing I really want, that they may not ever be able to happen at the same time. So how do I make
mm,
that transition? Questioning, or self-reflection, whatever you want to call it, um, opening up to the universal power of God's voice. What
mm,
is it? Um,
mhm.
and letting it speak to you. So I think all of these have been amazing points, and like, this conversation could keep going strong for a lot longer, but I'd like
Yeah.
to kind of start wrapping it up. And it's like, what we've really talked about so far today is, how do I rewire my brain to really release those things that aren't working for me and to bring in those things that will help me? And everything we've talked about is those word switches, those breathing, those things to do to refocus ourselves. So,
Mm.
PJ, how about sharing with our friend a little bit about you? Um, what you do, I know you kind of sprinkled it through. The information is in the show notes, but now that our friend has fallen in love with you, they want to hear what you really do. And then, what is that one thing that we could
Mhm.
try this week to see if we can let more of the goodness in?
Mhm. Well, it's easy to see my stuff. You just go to xgym.com, xgym.com, and it's all on there. And then as far as the brain type test, it's braintype.me, braintype me, braintype.me. is the way to take that test. And that's really the only two ways to get all the information. So it's pretty easy. And that as far as leaving you with something, my favorite technique is I call it the last 90 minutes of the day. Research shows that our brain ruminates while we sleep up to 15 times the last 90 minutes of our day. It also ruminates the rest of our day, but only twice. They still don't know why it ruminates of the last 90 minutes of the day, but it does. And while it's ruminating, it is spiraling either up or down while we sleep. So if we want to have a really good day tomorrow, we're going to make the last 90 minutes of our day awesome sauce. So we're going to be thinking of gratitude, love, forgiving ourselves. We're going to be thinking of the highlights of the day. We're going to be smelling flowers. We're going to be making sure that last 90 minutes before we go to sleep is amazing. So maybe that also means reconciling with somebody. So you don't go to bed angry. I mean, the Apostle Paul said, he was the first cognitive psychologist on record. He said, hey, don't let the sun go down on your anger, because he knew we're going to be ruminating on that garbage if we go to sleep that way. So it's purging, it's releasing, it's awesome sauce, thinking wonderful thoughts, and getting yourself in a really great state before you go to sleep. So your brain can do that over and over and ruminate on that 15 times instead of crummy stuff. And then you're going to wake up on the right side of the bed because your brain has helped you all night long.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I was just at an open discussion this last weekend, and they were talking about dreams and stuff. And one lady said exactly what you're talking about. I want to figure out how to talk to myself when I go to bed so that I go to bed happy and wake up happy because of it. She says, I've been crying myself to sleep for too long, and I need that positivity. I was like, that's exactly what she was looking for, is how do I fall asleep with a brain hack so that I wake up happy?
Huge.
That's beautiful, PJ.
Love it.
Hey, friend, PJ and I are not medical or mental licensed professionals. We are people that have been down a road. We've had our bumps and our dips and all the fun things. And if we can share a light on your path and help you see it a little more clearly, we're here for you. Thank you for joining, and stay tuned for the next episode.
Are you tired of waking up exhausted? You are not alone. If you're looking to take your life back, let's start with the simple step of adjusting your self-talk. Stay tuned for the next episode with your host, Lara Jane. Remember to follow the show so you don't miss the next simple step that you can use to feel more confident. And please leave an honest review.